The rain had started just after breakfast, tapping a rhythmic beat on the roof of Serendipity. The grey clouds hung heavy over Anderton Marina, the air cool and damp, thick with the scent of wet wood and fresh earth. Emma sat by the small window of her narrowboat, watching the drizzle slide down in thin, streaked lines. She rested her chin on her hand, the weight of the morning pressing on her shoulders. Her mind wandered to the city life she had left behind, the noise, the chaos, and how she had come to embrace the quiet, steady pace of the canals. The boats around her were still. Jack's lone wanderer loomed beside her, its midnight blue hull reflecting the dull grey of the day. On the other side, John's the Wayfarer sat like a guardian, its traditional design giving it an air of timelessness, while its modern technology hummed quietly beneath the surface. The three boats had become like a small floating village, a quiet sanctuary of sorts. Emma had found peace here, but today she felt restless. It wasn't the weather, nor the solitude. It was something else, a deep, unspoken weight that hung between her and her friends. She sighed, pushing herself up from the bench and grabbing her coat. A walk might help clear her mind. Jack was sitting on the deck of Lone Wanderer, the rugged man lost in his thoughts, his gaze distant. His weathered face was softened by the rain, his brown-grey hair slicked back from his forehead. He looked up as Emma approached, offering her a small, quiet smile. "Morning," he greeted her, his voice low and gravelly. "Morning, Jack," Emma replied, her voice quieter than usual. She tucked her hands into her pockets, watching the rain fall in sheets over the water. The ripples from Lone Wanderer spread out lazily, breaking the stillness of the marina. "You look troubled," Jack observed, his eyes narrowing slightly. He knew her too well to miss the subtle shifts in her demeanor. She gave him a fleeting glance, a half-hearted smile playing at her lips. "I suppose I am," she said. "Just thinking. Everything feels a bit stagnant today. I guess I need to clear my head." Jack nodded slowly, the kind of understanding that only someone who had spent years on the water could offer. "You know, the canals do that to you," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Sometimes the stillness is all you need. Other times, well, you've got to break out of it." Emma chuckled lightly, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. How do you break out of it then?" Jack gave a small shrug, his gaze turning back to the rain. "You don't. You just sit with it. Let it pass. It always does." Just then, a sharp voice broke through the air. "What's all this talk of stagnation?" John's voice had a kind of warm authority that came from years of experience. He was stood beside the side of the Wayfarer, his silver hair catching a glint of light as he raised an eyebrow at them. His expression was one of mild amusement, though his eyes held a depth of wisdom that seemed to have no end. "Good morning, John," Emma greeted him, though she felt a bit of embarrassment tug at her. She didn't like the idea of her mood being so transparent. "You two are sitting there like you've never seen a rainy day before," John continued, stepping down onto the towpath with a practiced ease. His movements were slower now, but no less deliberate. "Come on, let's take a walk. The weather won't bite." Emma hesitated but then nodded, grateful for the distraction. She followed Jack and John down the wooden planks of the marina, the rain still falling steadily around them. The sound of the water lapping against the hulls of the boats seemed to deepen in the quiet, a gentle, unending rhythm that felt like a heartbeat of its own. John led the way towards the end of the marina, where the trees began to form a canopy overhead. The rain, though persistent, didn't seem to touch them here. The world felt muted, softened by the mist and the trees that lined the canal. "You know," John said, breaking the silence, "there's something about this place that always brings me back to the roots of it all. The water, the boats, the old designs. There's nothing else like it." Emma smiled faintly. John's love for the canals was as deep as any ocean. It was in the way he spoke, in the reverence he had for the history that flowed through every lock and bridge. It was infectious too. Emma had often found herself looking at the water with a newfound sense of wonder since meeting him. "It's true," she agreed. "It's like the world slows down here. Makes you feel connected somehow." Jack, who had been unusually quiet, nodded in agreement. You get to know the water, the land. You start to see the way everything fits together, and it makes sense. All of it. They walked in silence for a while. The only sound, the steady patter of raindrops against the leaves and the occasional call of a distant bird. As they reached a small clearing, John stopped, turning to face them. "There's a story I've been meaning to tell you too," John said, a glint of mischief in his eye. "About the canals. About how they brought people together. It's something I've been thinking about a lot lately." Emma and Jack exchanged a curious look. John's stories were always rich with history, but there was something about this one that felt different. "I think we've got time for a story," Jack said, leaning against a nearby tree, his arms crossed. John chuckled and sat down on a nearby bench, patting the seat next to him for Emma to join. She did so, and Jack followed, settling beside her. "The canals were built to connect people, yes," John began, his voice taking on a familiar cadence. "But they also became a means of creating something deeper, something more personal. The boats, the water, the community. People relied on each other, and in that reliance, they found a kind of peace. Not just on the water, but in their lives. The same way we're here now. The canals brought us together in a way." Emma looked at the two men beside her. She knew their lives had been shaped by the water, by the boats that carried them across it. But it was more than that. It was the way the canals, in all their quiet majesty, offered a space for reflection, for connection, for quiet moments of understanding. "I think that's what I needed today," Emma said softly. A reminder that sometimes stillness isn't something to be afraid of. It's a chance to listen, to really listen. Jack and John both nodded, their faces thoughtful. The rain began to ease, the sky lightening just a little, and Emma felt something shift within her. The weight of her thoughts had lightened, the restlessness fading into something more peaceful. The three of them, moored together in Anderton Marina, were part of something much larger, a quiet, floating world where the water and the people intertwined, finding balance in the stillness. The moments stretched on, timeless and full of unspoken understanding.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this chapter of Emma's Canal Chronicles, don't forget to give a thumbs up and hit subscribe for more. There are plenty more reflections and canal-side adventures ahead, so stay tuned for the next chapter in Emma's journey. And for those who love thrilling espionage tales, check out the Evelyn March Espionage AI stories. With 2 exciting installments already available, you won't want to miss the suspense and twists that await. For those of you who enjoy storytelling on the go, you can also check out a wide selection of audiobooks that Emma, Jack and John love to listen to while cruising along the canals. Stay tuned for more fun and mysterious tales to come.